Alright, well, in a way, since the picture that I painted yesterday is not here, we need to start from the scratch. We're still talking about Jewish cosmology. Cosmology is the technical word that relates to the understanding of the world. Understanding the creation of God. The theological discipline, everything that relates to cosmology has to do with how God has created the world and how the world operates. You don't need proof to agree that people in 21st century have a very different cosmology, a very different way of understanding the world they live in. Thanks to science, we know a lot about our world that previous generations never knew. And the problem we have today is that we read the Bible with our own worldview. It's very intuitive. This is a worldview that belongs to us in our generation, and we read the Bible as if everybody knew what we knew about the cosmos. But in fact, if you read the Bible, in order to understand it, you have to try to reconstruct as far as you can, as much as you can, of course, the way people thought about the world when they were writing the sacred texts. And I hope to be able to show to you that the ancient people, including the Israelites, who were never a great nation in terms of power, imagined the world, believed the world to be like, or they had certain map of the world in their head when they were writing or when they were reading sacred texts. So how does the world look like in the mind of the people who were Old Testament writers, be it historians, wise men, or prophets? Yesterday I drew you a picture by which I showed you that in the beginning there was only water. So there was a watery sack, so to say, like a cosmic womb in which all life will be conceived and we will come out of. So the primary element, the primal element that God used to create the heavens and the earth, and particularly our world, was water. That's why water will be important in the Bible from beginning to the end. But interestingly enough, in Genesis 1, there's only water, which later on is called sea, when we talk about the waters underneath the surf, underneath the firmament, the lower waters, so to say. And if you read the final chapters of Revelation, you'll find out that in the new heaven and the new earth, there will be no sea any longer. These waters that were there in the beginning will no longer be there. So water is important. Water is important not only to day-to-day life, because water sustains all created forms of life in our world, but water is very important in rituals. In the context of the Jewish faith, in ritual purification. So water has to do with sin, with washing away of sin, washing away of filth, and with the process of preparation of one standing before the face of God. As you understand in the history of the Bible, seas and rivers, lakes are very important. They're a very important part of the stories, be it the Old Testament or the New Testament. And you have to know that the Old Testament builds itself very much on the story of the Old. For example, why is Jesus calming the storm? Why is Jesus walking on water? Well, because he is pointing to the fact that he is the one who told the waters to go up, and in that sense still them, and the waters that stay down he calls the sea is something that he controls. I made reference yesterday to Psalm 104, in which it says that by the rebuke of the Lord, the waters divided. Some of the waters went above the mountains, others stayed in the mountains as rivers and brooks. And later on, they surrounded the floating water, the floating earth as a garment. Remember? Now, it's very important that you draw this map in your charts, because one day you might need to represent it for somebody else or to present it to somebody else. And if you understand this, you'll understand a great deal of a lot of verses, especially in the book of Psalms, which is very focused on cosmology, how the creation of God works. So the lower waters that are below the firmament were called sea, or the deep, or the abyss. Now, double S or double B? Double S, abyss. Abyss literally means water without an end. Nobody knows how deep it goes. That's why it's called abyss. Okay? So these are all terms that you'll find in the Bible that correlate or correspond to the waters that are below, that surround the earth as a garment, according to Psalm 104. Now, the upper waters were called rakia in Hebrew, which is translated sky, or sometimes confusingly in the English Bible, heaven. So the Hebrew people, like many of the ancient people who composed their cosmological view on the basis of observation, realized that since rain comes from above, there should be something up there that contains water. And this upper water, called sky or heaven, is translated also in English as firmament. Or, there was one more word, let's see whether the enemy is. Firmament or expanse. These are all words for one and the same thing. In some English translations, it's called also vault. I think that's how they pronounce it. But this is all on the same thing. This is a watery layer that is the roof. It functions like the roof of our world. But now think about this. It is the floor of the upper world. This is the divide, which is a roof for us, but a floor to the divine world. Let me give you, for each of these, let me give you some texts. Now, let's open Exodus chapter 24. Verse 9. Yeah, verse 9 and 10. Exodus 24. Oh, I wrote flood. I meant floor. Flood will be another thing. Floor. Since this is the divide, it's a floor for the upper world, for the angels, but it's a roof for the lower world, for the humans. Right? So, Exodus 24, verses 9 and 10. 9 and 10. And it says the following: Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky itself. Now this sky is mentioned right here. And this sky is underneath the feet of God who appears to his people. Okay? Let's find another text, which is chapter 1 of Ezekiel. Chapter 1 of Ezekiel. Verses 26 through 28. This is a very important moment of theophany in which Yahweh appears to his prophet. And the prophet sees him sitting on a throne chariot that is driven by 4 cherubim. Ezekiel 1, what did I say? 26, 28. I'm giving a larger portion of the text because you need to put this in a context. We're searching only for one small element, but it's important for you to realize that whenever God appears, this crystal-like, heaven-like firmament is underneath his feet. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 through 28. Above the expanse, over their heads, and this is the heads of the cherubim, above the expanse, over their heads, was what looked like a throne of sapphire, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds in a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. And this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord when I saw it. I fell down and I heard the voice of the one speaking. Hold on a second. Probably I'm misleading you here. Yeah, well, we have also, again, this idea in verse 28. There's something like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. So again, you have clouds, you have this whole idea of a firmament. Then it becomes very clear in the Revelation. Now this is a Christian vision of the throne of God. And this time God is not riding on a chariot, this time He's sitting in His heavenly throne. So the chariot of fire is usually a representation of the heavenly. It's the mobile throne of God, so to say. But now John sees the throne itself. And in chapter 4 of the book of Revelation, when he explains what he sees, after he talks about the throne and the one who sits on the throne looks like a sapphire. He talks about the thunders and the bolts. He talks about the 24 elders sitting around. He says this. Verse 6. Also before the throne there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. Sea of glass that looked like crystal. So this is Revelation chapter 4, verse 6. Have you noticed that in our tradition we talk a lot about heaven, but we never describe it and we never explain it? In the Bible there are several very important moments in which human beings stand before the face of God who sits on His glorious throne. And there's a detailed explanation about things that people see there. We have several of those theophanies or throne visions. Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1, Daniel 7, Revelation 4. These are significant texts in which we have the description of how the throne of God looks like. And one of the elements that is there is something that is like a sea of crystal, clear like the sky. So basically this relates to the idea that there is just as there is sea right here in the lower world, which is called abyss because it's water without end, so to say, or people just have not enough imagination to know how far or how deep the sea goes. Up there is something that could be called angelic sea. Because it corresponds with the life of the angels as well. As I told you, it's the roof of our world, but it's the floor of the angelic world. Right? The angelic sea. And in the book of Revelation, I'm referring you to Christian texts, but you need to know that they're built on an Old Testament theological understandings. Another Christian text would be again the book of Revelation. And that would be chapter 15. Verses 1 and 2. Let's see what it says there. Chapter 15 of the book of Revelation, verses 1 and 2. And I saw in heaven, where is heaven? Right here, this is the upper world. Another great and marvelous sight. 7 angels with the 7 last plagues, because with them God's wrath is completed. And I saw what looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and standing beside the sea those who had been victorious over the beast and his image, and over the number of his name. They had harps given to them by God, and sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the son of the Lamb. Now, see where these people are standing. They're standing in something that looks like a sea of glass mixed with fire. Sea of glass mixed with fire. Now, they're definitely somewhere around the angelic sea, the roof of our world, which is composed out of a clear water that looks like crystal, right? And there it says that they're right there somewhere, gazing the throne. Why? Because the throne of God is the center of the spiritual world. is sitting on his throne, and his throne is the center of the spiritual world. So every eye, no matter where in the spiritual realm, in the multi-layered dimensions of the spiritual world, could always see the throne. Right? So the people are somewhere. John sees them in heaven, but he says they're close to a sea of glass. Looks like crystal. This is the sea, which is the angelic sea, called also Rakia. But now, why is it mixed with fire? And the answer is in Genesis 1. Genesis 1. Verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and to let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made the great lights, the great light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. Where are the great lights that we call sun and moon and stars positioned when God creates the order of creation? According to that text, where are they? At? On the expanse. He hangs them on the expanse. And now, the sun is right here. The sun is underneath the expanse because according to that text, it has to give light to the earth. So basically, the sun is part of the earthly realm. Although it's in the sky, it's part of the earthly realm. It's part of our way of living here. And then you have the moon, which is also there, and the stars. The stars. It says, He hung them on the expanse. So they're hanging somewhere on the firmament somehow. And so think about this. If you are a very primitive person, living thousands of years before Christ, how would you explain the fact that in the morning the sun is rising from the east and it's very low? It comes from this point. It's very low. In the middle of the day, the sun is very high. It's on top of your head. But in the evening, it sets down in the west. East, west. But then it gets really dark. You see only the moon. The sun is somewhere else, but not here, not with us. And when you wake up in the morning, the sun is right here again. And this happens every day. So how do you explain this? Well, that's how you explain it. There's an expanse that looks exactly like this, how do you call that? Like an arch, right? And because the sun hangs on it, it follows its shape. And then when it comes to the west in the evening, when it sets down, it goes on the other side. It makes a movement in the angelic world, and it comes back to our world in the morning. So this is a natural route of the sun, right? That's why we see it only part of the day, and the rest of the day It's not there. Of course, there were different theories. Some people believe that the angels hide the Son somewhere in a chamber, bring him in a chariot. Now, if you're curious to know how this is explained, you need to read the book of Enoch, the first book of Enoch. Part of the book is devoted to how the Son works. There's many gates through which he comes out and gets into, and the angels, they're controlling angels who control the Son, and they're the angelic forces of nature who are trusted with the Sun and the sun calendar and all of that. But anyway, what I'm trying to point out here is that the ancient people, they could make sense of their world only via normal observation. That's what they observed, a phenomenon. The sun is rising in the east, goes to the west, and that's something that they don't understand. They could figure it out. They could figure it out only by saying that it goes up on the firmament and then comes back. And now, why is the crystal sea above, where the souls of the redeemed are praising the Lord while gazing at His face, while He's sitting on the throne, mixed with fire? Because the sun, or the light of the sun, is available there as well. Whenever the sun is under their floor, it shines up, because this is a crystal floor, right? It shines up like a light put on the floor. Or whenever it's in the angelic world, in some ways, this water is mixed up with the light of the sun, and it's seen as a fire. These are visions that are descriptive, not definitive. They're descriptive. This is a feeling of a perception. That's why this is a description of a perception of a feeling. That's why Ezekiel is very careful to say, I saw something that looks like, or in the image of, right? I saw something that looks like the glory of the Lord, right? Okay? So, of course, naturally, hold on a second.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
In the Noah's day, the rains come from this layer.
Yes.
This upper layer.
Yeah, sure. This is where the rain comes from. And the rain is fully controlled by God. Fully controlled by God. Now, what about this layer? This is a very important layer. For example, if you read God's conversation with Job, let's go to the book of Job. Book of Job. So in the book of Job, I will not read the whole portion of text because it's fairly large and fairly long. But from chapter 38 onwards, when God appears to Job and speaks to him from the storm, he starts asking him questions. Let me look at my Bible. God starts asking him questions about things that relate to nature and the natural order of things. For example, from verse 18 on, the Lord is asking him this. Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Now, if God is asking a question like this, He relates to some kind of understanding that Job had about how the world works, how the universe is composed as a mechanism. Do you know the vast expanses of the earth? And then verse 19. What is the way of the abode of light? God is asking me, do you know why the sun comes in the east and then sets in the west and then comes back in the east? Do you know where I store it while it's gone? In other words, do you have understanding of that? Now, you have to understand that back in the day, these were scientific questions. It related to science. So, what is the way of the abode of the light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them in your places? In other words, can you take them down to where you live? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. That is an irony, by the way. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? Now, God is asking questions about things that Job knows are stored in heaven. This is snow and hail. Both of those things come from above, from the same place where the rain comes from, right? So ancient people believed that on top of the firmament, somewhere, there are storehouses. Where God is keeping in a store snow, hail, thunder, winds. Everything that comes from above is stored somewhere. And so God is asking him, do you know how I do all of this? Have you ever been up there? Okay. Twenty-fourth verse. What is the way of the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Thunder, lightning, winds. So there are storehouses on the east side for the eastern wind that blows from east to west. But there are also storehouses in the west that contain the winds that blow from the west to the east. Now, this is a totally different cosmology, is it not? And so later on, God is asking him all kinds of questions, like, for example, from whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens? When the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen. Okay, all of this relates to the layer that we call firmament, heaven, sky. Right there above it, there are storage houses for all the things that come down. And now God is asking him, if you make yourself so wise, if you think you're competent, can you tell me how things work here above your head? And then think about this verse 31, for example. Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? What are the Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? These are all constellations in the sky that are made up by stars, by which people on earth could orient themselves, as they were using the stars and the constellations of stars as compass. Right? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? The flood of water is right here, where the rain comes from. And it goes on and on and on and on. And God says, listen, if you don't know the most primitive things that are just the beginning of the heavenly life, if your mind cannot reach to the roof, to the top of your world, and you cannot give me basic answers for very simple things, how can you know my mind? How can you pretend of knowing why I do things the way I do them? So that was God's answer to Job, which was actually no answer. And Job realized how limited he is in his understanding of the heavenly things. And he repented for bothering to speak. So that is the end of the book. But again, if you don't understand how the world works in the mind of the ancient people, you will make no sense of this conversation.